While Atlantis does not exist as a travel destination, as a myth, it has exerted a huge influence on the human imagination's yearning for the exotic and mysterious to somehow or somewhere be real and tangible. Attempts to discover and explore the lost city of Atlantis will always be limited to our imagination, but there are instead very real islands within the North Atlantic Ocean that occupy the area alluded to by Plato in his stories about Atlantis. These are the islands of Macaronesia, more commonly known as the Azores, the Canary Islands, the Cape Verde Islands, and the archipelago of Madeira. They have come into existence relatively recently in geological terms, provoked by a hot spot within the Earth's mantle beneath the northeast Atlantic oceanic plate. As the oceanic crust of the African tectonic plate gradually moved northeast over this hotspot, Madeira literally erupted into existence. If Plato could have visited Madeira, which seems implausible as he placed Atlantis to the west of his known world of ancient Greece, then he may have been delighted to find his chosen location for Atlantis partly occupied by Madeira. The sublime and otherworldly landscape of Madeira presents you with an exaggerated green confusion of scenery, somewhat like taking a holiday to the Jurassic Period. Madeira is an island that provokes the imagination, conjuring up thoughts of lost worlds or forgotten lands. To begin this exploration of Madeira, it is probably a good step to start at the beginning. And for Madeira, this was some 5.4 million years ago when it first emerged from the Atlantic Ocean. Madeira is a volcanic island, and although no longer a site of active volcanism, this island-building activity continued until as recently as 25,000 years ago. Consequently, the island retains much of its altitude and geographic extent despite the erosional depredation of Atlantic storms, heavy rainfall, and continual marine erosion. Over many years, the heavy rainfall has eroded away the softer volcanic rock to create many deep and dramatic gorges across the mountainous island of Madeira. This rainfall is itself raked from the moist maritime trade winds by the central mountain ridges. Between 400 and up to about 1,600 meters, the island is often crowned by cloud and rainfall, summoned from the prevailing northeasterly trade winds, and all this rainfall makes Madeira both green and very rugged. In this land, where the vertical is as prominent as the horizontal, the landscapes can seem to be European, but like nowhere else in Europe. Some of the scenery in Madeira could be described as alpine, with steep and dramatic vistas within a green landscape accommodating narrow and condensed terrace fields far below. There is, however, an undercurrent of tropical verdant straining to erupt all around you. Traveling through the east of Madeira will take you through evergreen laurisilva forests, tree lines, and tangled banks of vines and shrubs that lead us away from the Mediterranean and towards tropical Africa. On the western side of Madeira, the scenery changes with a more wild and sparse landscape shaped by the incoming weather besetting this part of the island. The Pol de Serra Plateau is a mysterious moorland marooned in the subtropical mid-North Atlantic, thousands of miles from similar landscapes in more northerly latitude. The 1,500-meter high altitude of the Pol de Serra allows the land to accommodate scenery and vegetation more familiar to the moorlands of southwest England or of Welsh hills. A spine of often misty moorland curls away northwest from the high Pol de Serra Plateau, toward the north coast of Madeira and the small seaside resort of Porto. This seaside village could stand in as a visitor attraction on some other strange, unknown volcanic world. Natural seawater bathing pools have been eroded into rugged volcanic lava flows, presumably derived from the dramatic volcanic ash cone island of Ilhu Mole, sitting just offshore. With so many different landscapes, Madeira is already a menagerie of planet Earth's scenery. Along with its mild subtropical climate, this may have provoked the imagination required to create grandiose landscape parks and gardens. Many of these publicly accessible gardens were envisioned and established throughout the 18th and 19th centuries by aristocratic and mercantile family dynasties. This was at a time when Madeira was an important staging post for transatlantic trade, and as such generated huge profits for trade and shipping merchants from across Europe. A legacy of this wealth are the numerous grand estates and gardens left behind by those wishing to establish the worth of their existence on planet Earth for future generations yet to come. This was an age when there seems to have been some equilibrium between the drive for profit and a desire to improve and build for the future. The 20th century mania for exponential profit margins had yet to impose designed obsolescence and a commoditization of the mundane for the masses. The current crop of space rocket-obsessed billionaires seem to lack the aesthetic imagination to compete with the legacy of their predecessors. Instead, they direct their attention toward bequeathing us some nonsense about a business park in space, or spending $44 billion buying and breaking Twitter in a fit of pique. But back in Madeira, beyond these exotic landscaped parks and estates, there are natural wonders to explore that are easily accessible for nature enthusiasts. The two most high-profile examples are the famous Levada walks and the ancient evergreen Laurisilva, or laurel forests. Conveniently, these two can often be experienced at the same time, as many Levada walks pass through Laurisilva forest for part or most of their duration. This is especially the case when hiking around the northern side of Madeira, where the greatest remaining extent of Laurisilva forest still remains after 5 centuries of forest clearance by human occupation. The Levadas are man-made channels taking water for irrigation and domestic use away from the wetter northern areas of Madeira, such as the Pol de Serra, and delivering it to the southern coasts where the climate is drier and the soil more fertile for agriculture. The need to deliver water on long distances around a rugged and mountainous terrain necessitates a gentle gradient in order to get the water supply to its intended destination. This has the benefit of providing Levada hiking trails with long stretches of level or mild gradients for walking through the mountains of Madeira. It should be noted that many Levadas wind around mountainsides with precipitous drops, and this can be both awe-inspiring and alarming depending on your comfort with being exposed to such huge heights. The Laurisilva forests of Madeira are a relic of an ancient evergreen laurel forest that covered much of Europe and the Mediterranean basin for most of the current Cenozoic era. This was a geological period of time starting around 66 million years ago and lasting until today. The initial 10 million years of this time period saw the hot, humid climate of the previous Cretaceous period continue. Later in this Cenozoic era, there was a climatic change that saw a decrease in temperature and rainfall. This led to the decline of the European Laurisilva forests and their replacement by the now more familiar deciduous trees that were better able to withstand the periods of cold and drought inflicted by the deteriorating climate. These replacement deciduous forests were themselves periodically vanquished by the multiple ice ages of the Pleistocene epoch, beginning 2.6 million years ago and continuing up to the end of the last ice age 11,700 years ago. With the end of the last period of glaciation and the retreat of ice sheets to the north, there was a gradual recolonization of the European continent by deciduous forests. As these tree species again expanded their range northwards, they were also accompanied by a few species of hardy and adaptable evergreen Laurisilva forest species that had also survived further to the south. These include the familiar holly and ivy of today's European woodlands. We have just covered a lot of climate and geology over a lot of time, so let's recap on how this all landed. The Cenozoic timeline you are looking at begins with the end of the Cretaceous period, which is when the dinosaurs also departed from planet Earth. You can see the icon of their departure on the bottom right of this timeline. Above that, we can see the climatic cooling that occurred 10 million years later within the Eocene epoch. Later, within the late Miocene epoch, a further climatic decrease in temperature and precipitation led to the decline of the European Laurisilva forests and their replacement by a more modern flora of deciduous trees. This eventually culminated in the ice ages of the Pleistocene. that lasted from 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, and that is indicated on the upper right of the timeline by the iceberg icon. Significantly, Porto Santo Island was the first part of the Madeira archipelago to emerge above sea level some 14 million years ago. This is indicated on the right side of the Cenozoic timeline by the volcano icon. So, if you want to experience the pre-glacial world of Europe from millions of years ago, then the laurisilva forests of Madeira and other Macaronesian islands can provide this. They offer us a time capsule to look back into prehistory before the evolution and consequent Pleistocene dispersal of humans. Because of its volcanic creation back earlier in the Cenozoic era and a mild, humid, stable maritime climate, Madeira has also offered the laurisilva forest a lifeboat to survive these Pleistocene ice ages. While you won't discover the lost city of Atlantis within these ancient forests, you will experience the pre-glacial world of Europe from millions of years ago. Many people who walk through these UNESCO Natural Heritage Site forests leave none the wiser that they have experienced a unique time capsule from this ancient, long-lost world. There is also a misconception that it is necessary to hire a car instead of using public transport to access Madeira's levadas and laurisilva forests. This is not the case. And for some useful advice on how to access Madeira's many hiking trails by bus, you should read part 2 of this travel guide.